Good evening, Survivor Rights. Hello, hello. Um, it's been a week, everybody. I mean, it has been a week, and we've had a lot going on. But we are here. We had this scheduled already, and we just moved it around a little bit to accommodate some other scheduling. So thank you, Meliesa, for that.
Of course,
Our
you're welcome.
guest, yes, our guest tonight is Meliesa Tigard, and I am so glad for the professionalism, but also the lived experience that you're going to share with us tonight because you're now happily married and living a great life. We've seen a lot of
Yes.
you. Yes, you are a great writer. You have two books that you've written.
Hmm.
You've done a lot of posting on Substack and other things, and so you share that fairly freely and openly.
Hmm.
So we have a lot to get to tonight, but let's start by you just telling your side of a little bit about you.
Well, certainly. I live in Wenatchee, Washington now. I grew up in the what we often call the two by two church now. We knew it, of course, as the truth when we were growing up. I was a serious kid. I took it seriously. I was a true believer. I started out really trying to dedicate my life to the religion, and I thought that was the thing to do. I had positive motivations. I wanted to be selfless. I wanted to serve God. I wanted to do the right thing in the world and I wanted to help people. And that, for me, I thought was what I was getting into. And that's what I thought I grew up in when I was, before I had really processed it.
Well, that was a little bit of a shock when you had some processing to do, didn't you?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And there's so many levels of denial that we have. It took me a long time to really just sit down and compile the events that had happened to me and realize on the same day how many of them there were, because I would think of them separately and then compartmentalize them.
I think that's something that we became very good at is compartmentalizing things as a way of survival. It was definitely a survival mechanism that we had to process.
Right.
I
And
had a lot of healing to do from it.
right. And I think most of us felt guilty because we lived a track A life and a track B life. And we felt guilty about this track B life that we had. But the truth is that that track A life that we were told was supposed to be all of us was way too restrictive. It was way too, you had to be perfect and had to do everything all of the time. No one can do that. And so, for everybody who's processing out of it and feeling like they were a failure because they didn't do it hard enough, nobody did. Nobody could. That was the setup.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating. We have a lot to get to on that, but I just want to welcome a few people that are out there. Charlene Eicher's watching. She says, I love your writing. Mardell is saying hi. Darla is out there. I don't know who else is out there. We have a lot of people on, but if you're out there, give us a shout out. If you guys have questions as we go through this tonight for Meliesa, please feel free to go ahead and ask them. But we're going to just kind of have a chit chat like we're sitting over having a glass of wine or something. So, tell us first about your life now. You're happily married, you own your own business, you are an author, you're a mover and a shaker and get things done.
Yeah, I do quite a few things here in Wenatchee. Like you said, I own my own business. I started a tutoring center 25 years ago because I wanted to help kids and I struggled a lot as a young person and I wanted to make things better for others. And I've had that for 25 years. I met my husband about 11 years ago. I spent most of my adult life I spent single. So that was an outcome of what had happened to me in the church. So met him. He brought a daughter in the relationship, and so did I. So we have two kids together, and more animals than I can count. I think there's four cats and two dogs at the moment. Nine was our max. And things are going really well in terms of where my life is at as my health seems to go downhill, and it's everything that I have health wise is trauma related. And so that's the struggle, is putting together my life after the religion and finding my way to a better place and a self that belongs to me, and still struggling with some of these long-term effects of the religion and what it does.
Body keeps the score. It's a sad, sad reality.
Yes, it does.
Um, what was the hardest part of finding your identity of who you are now? When you went through that process, it took a while. Tell us about that.
I feel like when I left, it was like I didn't know, like you said, finding your identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my value system was. I didn't know what my personal spiritual beliefs were. It was like everything that was supposed to be in here was blank, but there was some kind of a sort of core piece that was me, and I don't know how I preserve that, because one of the things that I've read is that in these high control groups you aren't really allowed to develop a personal identity. You develop this group identity as a professing girl, for me. And so who I am as an individual was much less developed. And I did a lot of things, when I left the two by two religion, I sort of went as far as I could as possible. And I went into new agey thinking and crystals and magic and, and those sorts of things, and sort of kind of worked my way back from there. Into more of a rationalistic approach to life. And I remember thinking about, trying to figure out what my ethics were. And I feel like in those first few years, I did some things that were unethical because I didn't really have my own integrity in place. And I had to kind of figure out as an adult through trial and error what that was. And also, I've got to be honest, I think my dad is not uncommon with this, but there's a lot of two by two men who are extremely dishonest about money, about, hiding what's happening in the family. And that's what I was raised in. So there was all these layers of dishonesty that I didn't want, but were still kind of functioning as the way that I existed in the world. I went through some stages where I was drinking and I tried out some drugs, and I did a number of different things that I don't think I probably would have done if I wasn't in the middle of religious trauma. And I know that when you're back in meetings, what they do is they say, well, that person left because they just wanted to live this life of the pleasures of the flesh and all of that. And really what it is we've been so tightly controlled all of our life that when that control is off, we just kind of go this way. And plus, most of us have trauma. And that's going to like send us into all kinds of things that we probably wouldn't have gotten into had we not been in the midst of a high control group like that. So I feel like it was a long time for me to put together who I actually am. And part of the thing that I decided as a mom was I wanted to raise my kids in a way that they didn't have to spend a decade in therapy in order to overcome what it was that I did to them in the first 18.
I love that answer. That is just, such a huge reality of what happens on the outside. I think what's been so hard about the last couple of weeks for a lot of us, um, for a lot of people anyway, has been um, the reality of what we thought was strict religion, what we thought was pure, what we thought was, just trying to keep us safe and just trying
Yeah.
to do the right thing, was
Mhm.
really something much darker and much deeper and much not so friendly. Tell us about when you found out for yourself what the reality of how we were raised, what hit you.
Like everything else, it comes in degrees. And so there's the final year that I was in the religion. I had gone into the work, I got sick, I went home for surgery, I left the work, I went back to school. I'm back at school. I'm having chronic pain. The elder of my Wednesday night meeting says, "Oh, I have this thing that can help you," and arranges for me to come over. And this leads to him assaulting me. And so he got me alone by telling me that he could help me with something that I needed, which is, the subterfuge. I wrote that into my book because there's always a story that gets you alone. And people say, why was she alone with him? Well, he convinced her to be. He told her a lie. And that happened. And then I went to the sexual assault recovery service and told the gal there what it was that had happened to me. And, bless Victoria from the sexual assault recovery service, because she's the one who just sat down with me and said, that's a felony, and gave me an understanding that what had happened to me was wrong. For a while, I didn't quite leave the church yet. I was still kind of going to meetings, and struggling. And it was in the summertime when I went to 3 conventions in a row in 3 different states, and he showed up at all of them. And of course, he's being treated like, he's one of he's an elder, he has status, all of this, and I'm seeing this, and I know what he did. And the discontinuity of this leads to me having this complete meltdown where I just start to cry and I can't stop crying. And I say to myself, I feel like I've spent my life surrounded by unsafe men. I did not know at that time how many perps there were on that convention ground that day, but we know now there were many, and I was right on. The feeling that I had when I thought I was the crazy one, I wasn't crazy, it was real. And I had been surrounded by unsafe men. I had been unable to keep myself and others safe. And what came out for me was the realization ultimately that this is a theology that hurts people. I was taught it as a theology that was supposed to be pure, and I was supposed to be really dedicate myself to it, and that was going to give me a pure and wonderful life. And the reality was that I got hurt, and it was multiple times, and there were a number of different men that I knew who were doing various things that were unsafe and not okay. When I talked to my mom about this, I pointed out one of the elders, Sunday morning meeting elder, that we had a plan for how we would sort of keep him back off of us. Like, why did we need to have that plan? Why was it that this was a person who was lifted into leadership? And what I said to her was they were lifting these guys into leadership over and over and over again. That's what they were doing. And so it was the I'm surrounded by unsafe men. It was the feeling of this sort of underlying violence. It was the awareness of the things that had happened to me behind closed doors. And eventually I was doing a whole lot of personal growth that summer. I sat and watched the grass grow because I was really emotionally kind of just out of it. And in the fall, I was coming home from a massage with a gal who had done a lot of sort of energy work with me, because that's what I was kind of leaning toward at the time. And I was riding my bike home, and it was like I heard a bell ring, and I went, that's it, I'm not going back to meeting. And in the moment that I left meetings, that was the moment that I admitted to myself that I wanted to, because it was too hard for me to actually admit it before that time. And what happened after that was about a 6-week period where I was consumed by it. I was just in this complete ongoing chronic stress, very, very heightened anxiety state. But I couldn't talk to anybody. If I talked to anybody professing, they tried to pull me back in. I'd already been taught not to trust my worldly friends, right? And so I didn't say anything to anybody until finally 6 weeks later, I broke down on the phone with one of my best friends, and I said, I've quit going to meeting, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose my family. And she said, I will be right over. And she called our other two best friends, and the three of them headed over. And they just really created some emotional safe space for me, and just being there, just staying nearby. And that was what I needed at the time. After that, I got 2 phone calls from people that I had been in the work with, some people that I had been close to. And the first one got a hold of me, and she and I had a hard conversation. And she was saying, I guess there's no reason to leave. And when you're still in that mindset, there's no answer that anyone can give you that will be an acceptable reason to leave. And this is tragic, because for me, that moment on my bicycle was the moment that my authentic spiritual journey begins. And for the people who were still left in the church, that was when I took my own way, became bitter, all of the things, you all know what they say. And what a tragedy that was. And so I had this hard conversation with her, and she was like, well, the Bible says this, that, or whatever. And I was like, well, then I disagree with that too. And I just didn't accept any of the guilt trips. I had a hard conversation with my mom, who called me up and confronted me because Everett Swanson had written her a letter and said that I wasn't going to meetings anymore. He never contacted me. He just wrote my mother a letter and told her that I wasn't going to meeting anymore. And she wanted to demand why it was that I wasn't going. And I just kind of gave her the rundown of it's a theology that hurts people, and I don't want to be part of that. And then at the end of and she gave me a guilt trip about a couple that had asked me questions that had professed after, coming through me. And, oh, what are they going to think? Now you're responsible for their immortal soul. And I was like, I'm not, that's a guilt trip and I'm not going to ride. And then at the end of the conversation, she said, well, you're still welcome to come home for Thanksgiving. And I knew that on Sunday morning, she was going to come into meeting and she was going to say, we tried to love her, but she won't let us. And that would be the way that it was framed. I'd heard her do that before many, many times. She wouldn't recognize the reality that when I made an authentic choice that was for me and for my life, she couldn't support it. And that it was only okay for me to make choices that were in this very strict way that they had decided. And when I came to the realization that it was damaging and that it hurt people, they couldn't acknowledge that. And they couldn't acknowledge the authentic spiritual path that began for me at that point.
Boy, do I understand that one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. The way that they frame it and lay on the layers of totally ridiculousness is, I don't even know. It's beyond imagination.
Well,
I want to talk.
they're gonna start with you being wrong, and then they're gonna go
Oh,
from there.
yeah. Then it goes from there. Yeah. You got to just let all that go at some point. Okay. You spend a lot of your time now writing about people finding their voice and how to find their voice. It is something that it sounds to me like it was pretty exciting for you, but maybe it was terrifying in the beginning. I don't know. It sounds to me like you just woke up one day or was riding your bike, and
Right.
yes, I have had several moments like that in my life, but when those moments happen and you listen to them, I feel like that's a turning point. That's just a place where we just say, okay, this is a new chapter. It's going to start right now. Not everybody's able to emotionally or physically even make that shift. How did you physically and emotionally make that shift when when it was a great cost to you?
It was a great cost. I ended up losing everyone. And I want to start with where I was at the year that I left when I quit going to meeting, because I was in complete turmoil. All of the things that I tried to think my way out of it, there was something that the 2x2s had already taught me to loop me right back in. I would start trying to think my way out, and it was God is not the author of confusion. If you're feeling confused, then you should go back to meeting. Everything that I thought intellectually led me back into this loop of you should go back to meeting. So what I did during the first year was I bought time, and I said, this is not Life Choice Week. And that's what I did. And then the next week, I said, this is not Life Choice Week, because I wasn't ready. I hadn't found it yet. I wasn't ready. I just needed to put some space between me and it. And it took years. And I did various kinds of therapy, and I did a lot of, meditation and a lot of work on my own and journaling. And I just remember when I was doing the journaling, I was talking about this deep feeling of just existential dread that I had, this deep anxiety, and I just lived in this heightened anxiety state for probably at least 5 years, maybe even 10, after I made the decision to leave the religion. And that ties directly into the autoimmune disease that I have. It comes from the chronic stress of living in that heightened state. So it took me a long time. What I ultimately ended up discovering, and this is, I'm grateful to a number of therapists for this, because every time I would go to some kind of therapy, there would be some sort of imaginative use of make a mental picture of this, or something would be imagination, or it'd be a game where no matter what you chose would be wrong. Just build it, just do it this way, whatever you pick is the right thing. And what I realized is happening in those moments is that the therapist is leading you back to whatever that is your inner knowing. It's in your creativity. It's in your imagination. It's in your ability to play. It's in your ability to make things. It's in deciding that whatever it is I decide in this moment, whatever I pick up, that's going to be the right thing. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to spin it and I'm going to work with it. And so it was out of that then that I ended up writing the first book that I wrote, which was an imaginative, creative retelling of my own autobiography of how it is that I left this religion. And I decided throughout it that what kinds of symbols that I would use for this and how creatively I would explain that and how I would take this idea of this assault. But I don't want to go into I don't tell the details of it. And I don't want it to be overwhelming for anybody who reads it, but I want to take it and I want to put it into some sort of creative way that you can see what happened there. And you bring your own story into it because other people have a similar experience. And so it for me it has been just these being redirected back again and again by various therapists who said, um, you know, do something creative, write it, journal it, draw it, whatever. And that's where I found my way to my inner voice. And so when I started writing, after I created the Little Mouse book, which was the first book, I created a journal that goes with it. And the whole purpose of the journal is that you take your own story and you go through the themes in the Little Mouse book, and now you write or draw or record and talk about whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's a creative process, and go through the themes in as to how this was worked in your own story, using your own inner knower and your own inner voice. Because what I have learned is that any mentally healthy place is going to respect that your answers may be different than mine. Your whatever's alive inside of you might be different than what's alive inside of me, but there's room for both. That everything is by invitation, that I ask you and I get your consent before I get you coming along the direction that you're going with me, and I'm sure that that's what I'm asking for. And if it doesn't work for you, I find another way to do the thing I want to do, and I accept that you are a different person, and maybe we're not going to do this thing together, but maybe another thing later. And that's not a breaking of the rules of our relationship. So the rules of my marriage and the rules of the way that I deal with my adult daughter is all based on everything is by invitation. If this doesn't work for you, let's find something that does. What is alive inside of you? What works for you? And then it's my job to check in about what works for me. I studied Marshall Rosenberg's stuff for a long time. His communication, compassionate communication based on nonviolence, and that's where I learned a lot of these ideas. Because what Marshall Rosenberg helped me understand is that there's a difference between the strategy and the need. So if I come in and I'm really stressed out and overwhelmed and I want help carrying in the groceries, but you're in the middle of something else and that doesn't work for you right now, neither one of us is bad. And sometimes, like for example, I might need rest and you might need community. And it doesn't mean that we don't love each other, but right now I'm going to meet my need for rest. And if you want to meet your need for community, then you can pick someone else to do that with, and that's acceptable. It is not a failure. And that is how my marriage functions. If I'm not the person who can do something for my husband, he figures it out some other way. And if I can later, then we do it that way. But it's never a guilt trip or a you must or a requirement. It is I am inviting you to be involved, in this way. And if that doesn't work for you, then let's pick up with something else later. We'll be flexible about how that works. And it turns out that healthy relationships are just a joy to be in at so much deeper of a level than anything that I ever experienced growing up.
Yes, you have used my language. I say this all the time. What we're talking about here is an invitation, not an expectation.
Yeah.
And there is such a huge difference between an invitation and an expectation in
Yes.
any relationship. We talked about it a little bit earlier today, but it is healing is, the reason that we talk so much about journaling and gardening and whatever it is, the creative side of us that we need to do that. It's therapists promote that because it works.
Yes.
When we are able to get out of our certainty and out of our 1 + 1 = 2, and therefore this is that your mind is it's like it's in a track, and you can't get out of that track until you can find your creativity that lets your brain stop being on
And
the wheels going down the damn track.
And part of it is getting out of your intellectual mind. When you get
Yes,
into your creativity, it's a different way of processing, it's a different way of thinking.
yes,
And the other thing, too, that we have to be really clear about for everybody who grew up professing homes like I did, that what we were taught was a deliberate methodology to teach us to shut down our inner voice.
yes.
We were taught that what was inside of us that was speaking our truth was the world, the flesh, and the devil. We were taught that that was all wrong, and that what we were supposed to do was sit in meetings and listen to the message and obey and be happy about it and do exactly what they told us. And when we felt that inner conflict, we were told that we were the ones who were wrong. So we shut it down, we shut it down, we shut it down. We cut ourselves off from our own inner voice. So, of course, the process of healing is the process of going back and finding that, well, who am I really? What is my inner voice? What is speaking inside of me? I'm never going to let my hair grow long enough to touch my shoulders again because I don't want it. I don't wear dresses because I don't like them. And that is a choice that I make now as a grown up, and I am 100% allowed to do that. I'm allowed to get my nails done or not. I'm allowed to make all of these choices and think about how do I want to express my body. And my daughter just went and got her hair done, and it's lime green here and it turns to blue there, and it's got this beautiful, I mean, it's all kinds of things I would never going to be allowed when I was a kid, and it's gorgeous. And every time she does this, I say to her, it's your body. You get to wear it your way. I will take you to the salon to this amazing woman who will sit and talk to you about what it is you want and what'll work with your hair, and how we can make your ideas work, because she's got very curly hair, so it's got to not everything works. And I will step back and I will not make the choices about your body. And that's important to me, having grown up the way I grew up, that my daughters have the freedom to be able to express themselves in their own way. And even I need to give myself that too. I need to keep reconnecting with myself and giving myself the freedom to say, what is it that really works for me? What is it that I really want here? And also to find things that I enjoy in life and not just spend all of my time working, because that's one of the things that I do.
Well, we were all trained that way. So, leading with the personal agency, teaching people that they can have personal agency, or what even personal agency is, that I have
Mhm.
choice. What that means is I get to make this choice. That's what personal agency is. And when you have that, I get to make this choice about all these different things. And that can be overwhelming in the beginning when there's that many choices to make and that many things to go do because you're suddenly free to do them. And that's why they have the narrative around it that, they just want to stop going to meeting because they want to go do all those fun things. Well,
Mhm.
98% of us, no.
No, we left because of real, honest reasons.
Right,
I was assaulted, and then it was covered up, and then he was allowed to keep the meeting. And
right.
when I
And then
ultimately
you
called
blamed
the
me.
crisis line, his name was already on their list.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, two of the people that I turned in were already on their list. And I know what those people did. And they did those things over and over and over, and it got hidden and covered up, and the victims got questioned. This is not a healthy society.
So this is the part that is really hard for people to say, and I hate saying it out loud, but this is it was the whole point of our show last week. We only talked about 13 people. What we're identifying here again tonight is the culture of the church. It is the culture from the top down of completely covering up all of this sexual deviance. And there's
Mhm.
sexual deviance because there's sexual repression. It's
Yes.
not that difficult. It's
Mhm.
not brain surgery.
No.
It's just the way things are. Um, the sooner they face that and realize that, praying harder doesn't fix it. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And
There
that's,
is a
yeah,
there is a statistically significant high number of pedophiles who were born and raised in this church. And you find it in other high control churches that are big on purity and big on sexual repression. And every time you do that, you end up with a whole lot of sexual violence. It happens over, it's not just us, it's the FLDS, which is the fundamentalist Mormon groups that are the polygamous groups. It's the IBLP, that's the Duggar family came out of that. That guy, Focus on the Family guy, just is in a coma and at the end of his life now. And I've seen statements from some of his prior victims. It is one group after another. You see women dress some kind of religious way, and you are looking at a high control purity religion that is telling them things about how they have to obey, how they can't speak up, how they have to dress a certain way, and that dress will protect them. And did it protect you, Crystal?
Absolutely not.
Not. And you know what I did when I came home after that assault? I looked at everything that I was wearing and I looked for what I had worn wrong because I thought it was my fault. I thought my hemline was too high and it had nothing to do with what I was wearing.
Yes, so funny you say that because I have pictures. I look back at my pictures and I've done the same thing. I literally have a high neck up to here, like a high neck with ruffle at the top of the neckline,
Yep.
long sleeves, these big poofs up here, but these long sleeves down to here, again with a ruffle. So my wrists are not even showing, my neck is not showing. And then I have on this long green velvet skirt that goes almost to the floor. And underneath that, I have on my nylons and my shoes. And I look at that and I was 15 years old and I think to myself, and you all want to say, I did something wrong?
Yeah.
It was my fault? Like, it's shocking when you use their narrative and their rationalization as to how this happened. It's sick.
It is everything other than put the responsibility and the accountability on the person who did the action. And the person, and this is one of the things that I have said before, that is a man who committed a felony. That's not anything to do with me. He is a person. And if he gets any kind of consequence out of that, if it ruins his life, the people find out about it, if he gets any kind of charges of legal consequences for that, he is a man who committed a felony. He deserves that. That's got nothing to do with me.
And that's a hard place to come to when, we were just talking earlier on Worthy about why didn't we call the authorities? Why did we just accept that, it was going to be handled? It was the standard language, and the standard answer was, well, because we went to the workers instead. Like you can around the world that with it's shocking how much that dialogue, we went to the workers, equates to, and therefore nothing was ever done. And I am still battling the harm that was done. I'm not personally, but a lot of people are still struggling with what happened to them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I did. I told Everett Swanson, and then I never said anything to anybody else because I didn't want to be accused of speaking bad of a brother. And then I just sort of quietly disappeared and stopped going to meeting sometime in the next year or so after that. And I realize now that there was a calculus that was made. And the calculus was that a man who had money and a family and had a meeting in his home was a higher value. And I was the one who was let go. I was the expendable one. And that no matter how hard we worked as women, no matter how dedicated we were the expendable ones. And that is the truth of what that theology is actually doing in practice.
It is a very, very harsh reality. Let's talk for a second about, go back to your books. I love the workbook that goes with it because I think it's true. I mean, it can be any religion and any kind of high control.
It's true.
But the narrative that goes with it, and the journaling piece of it, what I want you to do is just kind of walk us through your characters and then how the little mouse story leads into the purple war.
Sure. So Little Mouse is the first book that I read, and that it starts the way that it always starts. It starts with her loving her community. She loves it. She's dedicated to it. She works hard. She wants to get along. There's Elder Mouse here that she thinks is amazing, and she looks up to him, and he's wise, and he teaches the young folk, and she just wants to learn and do the right thing. And that's who she is, somebody who works hard and who genuinely believes. And every day she's walking past this purple door, she's churning the butter, she's going and selling it in the marketplace, but she and she doesn't have any time to be thinking about any purple doors, because she's got stuff to do. And then the Elder Mouse is talking to the kids, and we find out that Ophelia's gone missing, and Little Mouse wants to ask about Ophelia and find out why she's gone and where has she gone to. And there's hushed silence, like her question is wrong. And Elder Mouse says, no, you have to just let her come back. We can't go get her. She's gone through the purple door. Now we know what the purple door is for. And Ophelia has disappeared through it. So what could this be about? But Little Mouse is continuing to just work hard, because that's what she does. And then she gets a letter from her sister, and her sister sends her a key in the letter, and it says, for when you're ready. And she doesn't know what that's about. And then one day she stops, and let's see, is that, yep, one day she stops at the door, and she puts the key in it, and she turns the lock, and she feels, as she can tell that the key actually turns the lock, but she's afraid to open the door. And I was afraid to open the door. I heard about the secret sect almost a decade before I actually left the church. It was nearly 10 years before I told my sister about it, and she went and got the book and mailed it to me, which is why I used a key in there. That's representative of the secret sect that ultimately was a key to my leaving, and I had it in my possession for years before I actually used it. So she continues to just work hard. She doesn't actually open the door. She moves on and figures out she's gonna what she's going to do. And then Elder Mouse starts paying attention to her, and he says that he's sick and only her soup will do to make him better. And so she goes to buy the freshest herbs, and the merchant gives her this opaque warning. He says, don't let it go to your head. Other mouses have let pride be their downfall. So he gives her this warning, but he doesn't really explain what it's about. And when she gets there, Elder Mouse isn't sick. The whole thing was a setup. And he grabs her and he pours the mushroom tea on her, and he's trying to get it into her mouth. And she plays along with his deception through this entire scene. He is saying, I'm old and ill and very weak, and I could never hurt you. And then he attacks her again. And as this happens, she says, I'm so glad I could bring you soup today. And then she grabs the door and runs away. And I don't know if you had situations like this, but I know there were so many situations with unsafe old men where I played along and I never spoke the truth. And I never got through the deception. Anyway, she runs to the marketplace, and now instead of being helped, which is what she's looking for, they accuse her because she's covered in the mushroom tea. And they want to know why it's on her. And I wrote it that way because we know that when we tell the story of what happened to us, the ugliness of the story sticks to us. And the man who did it is not in the scene. He is somewhere else. And if he's ever questioned about it, he will claim complete innocence and surprise. And he will do that every single time. So this is the point at which she gets scared enough and hurt enough that she goes running through the purple door. And here is the dark night of the soul. And I think we probably all went through that. That was the time when I didn't know whether I was going to choose to keep living. And that lasted longer than I wanted to have. It was the time that I made decisions that I don't want to talk about now. And I struggled. And I was in a deep mental health crisis. I didn't know what religious trauma was, but I was experiencing it. Eventually the sun comes up and she comes over the hill, and there's a city. And from here on, she gets a guide. It's a capybara that is her guide, and he walks her through the city. And he tells her about her options. Well, the city is just a bunch of little villages, and they're all just put together. And what you can do is you can decide you want to be part of this or part of that or something else. And there's a point where he says to her, and she asks about what happened to her. And she couldn't believe that a mouse could be a predator because a mouse isn't a predator species. And the capybara explains that some of the cleverest predators hide among the weaker species because nobody guesses that that's who they are. And then he tells her not all villages are good places to live. It doesn't matter the size of the village or the city, but the culture of the folks that live there. The city is many villages melted together. You can be part of this or that. You can change your mind if you outgrow it. Any village that teaches it's the true mouse way will treat you badly because you can never leave, no matter what they do. If the elders in a village know that you'll outgrow them, they treat you with respect because they have to. And that is the only safe village to be in. Eventually, this conversation takes our main character to her reunion in the final scene with her sister, the one who sent her the key. And there is her sister with Ophelia, the mouse who has gone missing. And the two of them are holding hands because they're a couple. And this is who they are now. And they went and found their way in a place that allowed them to live as who they are. So that's the Little Mouse.
Love it. Love it. Tell us now about the purple door.
Well, the purple door is the what Little Mouse goes through in order to
Yeah.
find her way, and that represents whatever path it is that we took out of the religion. The second book is Little Bee and the Golden Key, and this is the backstory of the sister who sent her the key. And Bee has a whole different experience than Little Mouse. When she goes through her experiences back in the village, she's being told that the tip of her tail, which is a rainbow, it needs to be painted over. And that you can only be red or blue, and it's always painted red, and that's the way that it has to be, and it has to stay that way. And it's itchy and it's hot and it's uncomfortable. And all of her life, she's being told that her authentic self is not allowable. And it's not until ultimately what happens is that she meets an outsider who gives her a different perspective. And Bee's experience is that she always knows that something is wrong. Little Mouse completely dedicated herself into it and believed it wholeheartedly, but Bee smells something off. It always smells bad. And she's like, why are they saying it's so great? Because it smells bad. And she always just knows that inside of her heart. And I knew other people who were like that. They were like, I just always knew that this person or that person was an evil person. I just always sensed that something was off. And they, even if they grew up in professing homes, they never really bought in. These are the kids who didn't profess until they were 12, or maybe professed 3 or 4 times, or, that kind of thing, where they just couldn't do it.
Just at all.
Right, exactly. They just couldn't do it. And because I knew some people for whom that was their story, I wrote that into the Little Bee story. And when she does take off the paint and go home with her rainbow tail out showing to the world, her parents throw her through the door. And that too is a story. And she finds her way. She tells you that it's years before she finds her way to, there's a mob of meerkats that picks her up when she is devastated and cold and hungry and in the rain, and she doesn't know that she's going to survive. And this is a group that picks her up and takes care of her and nurses her back to health, and then just drops her off at Rodent City and in the spring, so that she can continue on to make a life. And there are people who are the ones who gave me pieces of the story that I still tell about Bob the Buddhist man, who was so instructive to me in the early days when I left the 2x2s and I was really struggling. And I don't know where he is now, and he doesn't know I still talk about him. But he was an instrumental part of my story. And so we have people who maybe helped us, and maybe with no obligation, just and didn't stay in our lives. Maybe there were communities that we joined that we moved on from. It's okay. And then Bee tells you about her way all the way to where she creates a chosen family where they celebrate the high rodent holidays together, and now she has a life in Rodent City. And at the end of the second book is when Little Mouse from the first book arrives at the door. So both two books end at the same place. with the two sisters reuniting. And I do have a plan for where it's going to go after.
Yay.
So,
I love that. That is so beautiful. And what a great story. I hope everybody that's listening can read these books and do the journal for themselves, because the other big piece of this that I feel so strongly about, and why I really wanted to have this conversation with you also, is that we came out of certainty. And
yes. Hmm.
certainty does not yield creativity very
No,
well.
and it's not
And
healthy.
it's very unhealthy, very, very unhealthy.
Hmm.
And so I just want to encourage anybody out there that's listening. Our human nature is going to go from certainty to certainty because it's going to demand certainty or want certainty because it thinks that's what it needs. And that's because that's all it's ever known. And that's partly why that first period of time for us is so difficult, is because it's like jumping off a cliff and literally not knowing where you're going to land or what's going to happen. So
Hmm.
to find your way through creativity there, and to just let play and dreaming and scheming and ideas and play, you know, that is such a healthy way. You don't have to be reading self-help books 24/7. You don't have to be watching podcasts and doing all that. You should also be gardening and journaling and traveling and cooking and whatever it is that you love to do, sewing, but maybe not make quilts all the time. Maybe make something else, you know? Um, so that's really uh the essence of this show that I hope people take away is your strength, but also that connection to the creativity piece, and to not look for certainty, because really at the end of the day, nothing is.
You
It's an
can be
illusion.
comfortable with the unknown. We
Yes.
were taught that everything was known and that we had to have answers to every question.
Yes.
And so, one of the things about walking away and deconstructing from the two by twos is being comfortable with not knowing everything.
Right.
And I consider myself an agnostic at this point because I do not know what happens after we die. And I am allowing for whatever that is. And for me, the intellectually honest position is to say, we can't get there and then come back and tell about it. So we don't know. And then to just leave that open. And what we do know though is what actually yields mental health and physical health. And we know what yields good results here on planet Earth. And those things are exactly what you just said. It's the creativity, it's the connecting to your inner self, it's respect and boundaries in your relationships. It is being able to embrace doing the things that you love and to really get in and experience and love your life. Those are the things that we know that bring physical and mental health. We know they do it, they bring healthy relationships. It happens over and over and over again. So we do know that's going to yield good fruit. And we also know from our own experience, as well as the experience from many of these other groups, that every single one of these high control groups creates abusive relationships between man and wife, abusive dynamics between parent and child, a high level of pedophilia and sexual crimes. And then we see in adulthood people who were raised in these with chronic pain and autoimmune diseases and health problems that are directly tied back to a high trauma childhood. It can't be right. It can't be right if it does that to your body.
That is not the way. But here's the other thing that I want to say, that I would say to be true about you, is that even if that is your belief system, you're not putting that on everybody else. You're not saying everybody should be this way. You're
No,
saying
I'm just saying this is what I know.
exactly. That's the thing that we don't know how to do coming out of the two by two church. We don't know how to listen to somebody like you that's saying all of these things that are very healthy and very on point. Any psychology book in the world will say, uh, this is mentally healthy, this is physically healthy. These are things that strong communication, creativity is, it helps with healing, all of those things. The second that you say that you're agnostic, it's like this wall goes up and people are like, oh, I can't listen to that anymore or whatever. That's what I'm trying to help people understand. Yes, you can.
And
You can learn.
what's interesting is that because I have a professing background, I've read the whole Bible and I've spent a lot of time with it. And there's many, many pieces of it that I love. There's a great deal in the four gospels that I think are fabulous. And I don't have to give any of that up. I go to a church. My church has Christianity as its background. I simply don't take a position on what happens after we pass. And that's allowable within the framework of going to a Christian church.
Right. And that is one of the hardest parts. I encourage people all the time to start by worrying about their own self and their own salvation and just start there because we are so used to judgment, judgment on what everybody else is doing. And that dictates our life because you said it in the beginning of the show. We were raised with groupthink. We were raised with the filter of what is best for the group, not what do I do individually. And so to start to come out of this and to start being able to go through the process for themselves of this is who I am and this is what I believe and this is why I believe it, to put your critical thinking cap on and to go through the analysis process for yourself and to sit alone with it and listen long enough to say this resonates with me or it does not resonate with me. That is a process each person has to go through. But in the meantime, there's some really amazing things that you could be doing for your mental health around creativity and exploring all kinds of things. And it doesn't mean going to therapy every day of the week and reading all these self-help books and listening. Like it's you got to have balance. Does that make sense?
And the way that I often describe it is that there's many paths up one mountain. So to me, in many, many different faith traditions, we end up finding some of the same things. So what you and I are talking about today, where what we find as the route to mental health, you find that in all kinds of faith traditions. The idea that you should meditate and you should spend some time on the things that are spiritual and you should not just live a life that is about superficial things. The community being important and as a part of your life. All of these things are in the faith traditions. They're wonderful things. You don't have to give them up. And you don't also have to know that your answer works for someone else because it could be the fact that that person is just on a different path on the same mountain as you.
Yeah.
So let's let them walk up it.
Let them. I say it all the time.
Yes.
Let them. I have 2 tattoos, one on each hand. Let them and let them because that's how passionate I am about it. Every day, the world knows I type a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, this for me is a reminder to practice what I preach, to
Mm-hmm.
let people be. I can model what I believe is healthy,
Mm-hmm.
what I believe is strong mental health, physical health,
Mm-hmm.
connection, community, communication, all those life skills that we did not get out of the 2x2s. That's all I'm
Right.
trying to do here.
Right.
But I do type a lot. And I am reminded every day I am responsible to them, to you, not for you. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. My
Mm-hmm.
job on this earth is to be the best person I can be, not to make everybody else be the best. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yes,
No.
and I can absolutely love people and inspire them. My husband came up with some
Yes.
things that were really mentally healthy the other day, and I was like, wow, good job. You this. And he was like, he turned around, and he said, Lisa, I learned that from you. I'm giving you this support now because you gave it to me and you showed me how this works. And that is why you are now receiving this kind of support from me, is because you taught it to me. So I'm not responsible for him and for his choices. His path is his own, but I certainly influenced him.
Yeah.
And in so doing, I have a lovely and fantastic marriage.
There you
And
go.
how great is that?
Yes.
And that's the thing, is that there is room for other people to be different, and there's room for them to grow in their own way. And sometimes you see something about someone that you love, and it takes them a while to grasp it themselves because their path just took them a while to get there, and you were looking at it from a different perspective. And just allowing them to grow at the rate that they grow is a healthy thing.
Yep.
It's okay for people to be different, and it's okay for us to just sit back and say, there's things I don't know.
Yep. I totally, totally agree. We just talked in Worthy for quite a while about the difference between what you being very honest and clear about what I can control or influence versus things I literally have no control over. We cannot control those overseers. That's on them.
Yeah.
There is so worrying about it, thinking about it constantly, having that much anxiety about it, letting it really derail your life. That's not healthy.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
okay.
I
It's
don't know
knowledge that you need to
them.
know, but you got to let it go.
It's hard because we know that there are still people being hurt.
Yes, very
We
hard.
know that they're still allowing children to be hurt there,
Yeah.
that there are still people being deeply, deeply
Yes.
hurt by this theology. And it is hard to sit back and let that injustice be done and to know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of it. And we totally have the right to our grief about that.
Mhm.
That is real and rational, and there is a reason that we have it.
Yes,
What we can't do is let it decide our life.
right. Totally agree. If anybody out there has any questions, go ahead and post them now. We're getting down to the end of our time here. I'm going to ask you if there's anything else that you want to say. Otherwise, my last word question for you is what the word unbroken means to you.
For me, it is, I have been through more in one lifetime than many people. I know the level of grief that I carry and the woundedness and how deeply, deeply damaged I have been. And yet, here I am, speaking up, writing books, leading civic activist organizations here in Wenatchee, Washington. I founded one. I'm not done. And I'm going to continue to push for justice for children in the work that I do, in our democracy, in the ways that is important to me. I'm going to continue to do the work. And that makes me unbroken.
Love that. I love that. Charlene's asking if your husband was raised in the 2x2s.
He was not. He doesn't know anything about it. He was in a family that kind of went to church a little bit here and there, and was never even deeply religious at all.
I want to thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, Charlene and I are kind of related to each other through marriages and all of that sort of thing, and it's a small world.
Yes, it is.
And you mentioned Darla Denherter. I'm pretty sure I remember her when she was in the work. So,
Yeah.
it is a small world, and if you want to reach out to me, go ahead. I'm just out there trying to help people deconstruct because I feel like I have a clear seeing eye, and so that's what I'm doing with my writing and that's all on Substack, is just writing about what happened to us and helping us understand it so that we can deconstruct.
And that link will be posted and also links to both of your books, and the journal.
Right.
So we'll be posting all of that. All right. I cannot thank you enough for your time and energy. Thank you so much for what you're doing in this space and for how much you love and care and are giving back, especially when you do carry what you carry. I totally understand that. You and I are a lot alike in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Thank you for being with us and for all the things that you did to get ready for tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your night. And I am pretty sure we'll be chatting again, my dear.
Sure we will. Thank
Yes,
you.
we will. Take care.